Hello, this is the Ideal Line podcast. Luke McBain is an artist, a writer, a filmmaker, and a philosopher who's interested in meaning creation, and he's an expert in leadership. Please take a look at Luke's writings and his YouTube channel. I very much enjoyed talking to Luke. It's not every day I come across someone who thinks exactly like me. Enjoy. You have so many writings, and I always thought that there are few Luke McBain writings online, and there is always more. One of my favorite, I thought not to bring that up, but art is a psychoactive substance. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's because it's true. I came up with that because I was very much involved in training actors and very interested in how to learn writing and filmmaking and educate people on that. And also in terms of this whole thing I did on leadership development, where also, so I guess the point being that, or you could also call it personal development, is that many people use artistic tools for personal development, therapy, and so on, and they use also music, right? So musical pieces for people to associate to relax into, to recall memories and all that. And when thinking about that part, which I think it's totally valid to do this, but when you use, let's say, I don't know, a musical piece by a famous composer, let's say a piece by Bach or Mozart or whatever, to have your client or the person who you're working with to, associate to or to recall something to, and you're working with a psychoactive substance where most people are not aware of the effects of that substance. So because the artist already has some sort of intention or wants you to feel something specific, so you're already directing the mind and the psyche into a certain direction when you use art. And I would argue that a lot of therapists and coaches, so basically they hand over the control over the direction to an artist, right? And they are not aware of this somehow. They don't know exactly how this substance or this musical piece or that piece of art really influences somebody else. So that's why I wrote that piece. This psychoactive substance basically as an act of defiance against art being used too loosely in, let's say, therapy or coaching and all these things. Handle with care.
Yep. Someone like Bach, maybe he's trying to convert people into religion. That's how I like to think about him. But these thoughts have their places. Bach made music for Christians. Couldn't think that someone in the world very far away could be affected by it. But here we are, and people don't very much like to talk about the negative aspects of art and music.
Yeah, and think more deeply about that aspect and see how it influences you and into what direction, in fact. And so my conclusion of that, I mean, it's still valid. You can, listen to all sorts of music and have some sort of experience to it, and that's totally fine. However, I would even argue that the mind itself is inherently artistic, so you don't really need the psychoactive substance to arrive in that state of mind. Like you don't need to take a chemical substance. You can do this all with your own mind, basically. So this is the argument I'm trying to make in effect. So yeah, some people travel far to take ayahuasca, but you don't need all of that. And you don't need magic mushrooms, and you don't need Bach. So you don't need those things. They're fine. I'm not saying that has no no effect. But so my I stand on the point that there's a way into those kinds of experiences, also spiritual experiences, without those substances.
Yeah, it's different to listen 2 minutes of music than to practice it with your life, in your whole life. Or
yeah, it's more immediate, that's for sure. It's very inspirational. It's more immediate, and yeah, I mean, it puts you immediately into like this trance state of mind, right? This is just, it goes like this with, especially with music. I think it's like you're immediately in this other world. So that's the great thing about it. Yeah.
could you explain a little bit what it's liminal spaces or luminosophy?
It's just it's exactly that. Like when I just said, it puts you immediately in this trance-like state of mind. Music, it doesn't matter if it's popular music or classical music, just like that. Just then you're already in that state. You're already in that liminal state, and perhaps there's a lot of other probably perspectives and definitions of that, and people would call it like trance state or dream state, or I think trance is probably the most common name for that, but then trance associates something where you give over the agency over that to something else, right? It's people, when they hear trance, they think, oh yeah, you are in this state of mind, but you have lost some sort of agency over it, and you're not really connected to whatever you might call the real world. You're just disconnected. You're somewhere else. And I would argue that's not the case. And therefore, I prefer the term liminal state, which is like the in-between state of the waking rational state of mind and maybe the deep sleep state of mind. Probably we're always somehow in this state of mind. Like there is no hard boundary, or there's no way of saying now you're in that state, and so there's no way of doing that. But I guess there's a way of experiencing that state in full agency and consciousness, but without having that feeling that now I'm just giving up agency. Because
could we say that luminosity is a force?
Is a force?
Is a force like acting on us?
It could be, it could be a force which is acting on us. And then sometimes people also ask, does this space exist apart from us? And all these sort of questions. And I would say yes and no. Like these spaces do exist apart from us, but we are always part of them. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how I see it. It's a little bit like culture, like the term culture. And I had for years tried to figure out what culture really means. Like at face value, we probably all believe that we know, we sort of have we have an understanding of culture. Yeah, probably everybody you talk to say, yeah, culture is sort of like know what that is. But where is it, in fact? Like, what is it and where is it? what is it? And how do we experience it directly? And I would say it's the same thing. Like it exists with us and because of us, but it also exists without us. Like there's a space which sort of like exists collectively. And we are part of it and we're making it, but it's also there when we're not there. So, yeah.
How does novelty arise in
novelty
in liminal space and our usual space? I'm also asking this in relation to jokes.
Yeah, that's a good one. I was very, very interested in this question also for a long time period. Like this question of how do new things arise in the world? How does creativity arise? And all I can say is that within that liminal space is highly creative. Like it's constantly creating, and you can see it on. Like there's no such thing as something which is non-creative, which is strange. I mean, somehow we seem to believe that when we are just in this waking state, that there is something which is creative and something which is stable. But in fact, there is nothing stable. Everything is constantly creating all the time. So the question is a little bit redundant in terms of where does the new thing come from, because it constantly arises all the time. And the joke thing is interesting. I haven't put a lot of thought into it in terms of what is, but it's also very humorous. I would say novelty, because of its contradictory and surprising nature, is very funny also. Like I've experienced a lot of good times in that state of mind. It was there's always fun to be had. It's serious, but it's also fun. And I don't know where I think the fun comes from the unexpected creativity in that space, which makes you laugh because you don't expect it. It's paradox, contradictory, it's new. So there's a certain joy in it, I would say. Yeah.
What does jokes have to do with meaning?
Probably a lot, but I'm not, as I said, like I'm not really an expert on jokes. I'm probably terrible at telling them. Always was, even as a child, and I wouldn't be able to say. Yeah, it's just this the unexpectedness of it all. There's something, probably in a joke, there's some sort of deeper truth which is being revealed, but more in a delightful way than in a dramatic way. Like that's probably the joke, humorous, that what makes you laugh about it, that it sort of reveals itself, but it's non-threatening, I would say, and that's why it makes me laugh.
You said leadership makes other people help find meaning. Which
that was
stuck in my mind.
That was I was working on leadership for a long time period. Currently, I'm doing other things, but I was working on that a long time because I was looking into the whole theoretical structure of that, and which is the theoretical, like the whole theoretical building, if you want to call it like that, is on one hand interesting, and on the other hand, unfortunately, a little bit crude. Let me put it this way. So not very sophisticated. And the connection, although the connection between meaning and leadership is like it's completely apparent. Like everybody would say, yes, that does make completely sense. Very little effort is being put into, especially this field, how meaning is being created through people, through individuals, through groups, and so on and so forth. I would argue that this is the most important aspect of leadership, so sense making and meaning. But other people would disagree, right? So there's a lot of conflicting theories around that. I guess every person who has worked in a group or in an institution, I guess their biggest complaint always is a lack of meaning, right? Or something that doesn't make sense, or a boss who's acting against some sort of core value, or not able to explain things in a certain way. Of course, apart from the fact that there's more serious stuff like, I don't know, harassment or bullying or just toxic work culture. But as soon as you start talking about it, you see it's all again about the culture. It's about this aspect of creating positive culture and a meaningful environment and all these things. So yeah, and then when you say, well, leading and meaning creation are interconnected and vital, then automatically you come to art. Yeah.
The part of reasons I become a writer, that I wanted to write, because I wanted to have full control. Even if it's small or unimportant, I wanted to take care of it myself. But not all art forms are like that, like cinema.
Yeah, there's something very true about what you're saying in terms of having control over this. Yes, and on the same time, like I would say, any artistic process is the part of the surrender to this unknown. And so it's very very paradoxical that on one hand you have to surrender to an unknown outcome, also with writing. On the other hand, you want to have agency over this, right? You want to have some sort of influence. You would like to have this connected to yourself, right? So this is very paradoxical. So on one hand, you surrender to this, and on the other hand, you'd like to, connect it to yourself and see that you are part of this creation. And that's where, again, like we talked about in the beginning, in terms of liminal space, you have both. You surrender, but you still have agency. And that's where also the connection to leadership comes in. So when you talk to a lot of people who are responsible for something, budget or people or projects or whatever it is, and they're authentic, when you ask them, why are you doing what you're doing? They say, well, I would like to create something or shape something, right? So they would like to be in charge of something which they can shape, future, for example. And there again, you see this analogy between an artistic process and what shapes in the future. As for your point in terms of cinema, yeah, that's where again, I think it's the same thing. It's just that it's a different genre or field. That's what it is. Like the act itself is similar. Like if you read Tarkovsky, and he talks about sculpting in time, you could feel that, yeah, you can apply this also to the act of writing. That writing is also sculpting in time. So it emerges from the unknown, is sculpted all the time. And he claims that filmmaking is this process, and he never defers to the fact that he's working with a lot of different people. He never says, like, he would never say, well, I would like to achieve this, but there's all these people I need to work with, and they're getting always in the way of what I need to do. That's what's really fascinating about his claim, right? Especially, and I think that's unique in terms of cinematography. Yeah.
In the Renaissance, the paintings were done with a whole group of people who are led under a master painter.
Yeah, and Roy Lichtenstein did something similar, no? When he had like a whole teams working on his paintings, pop art, who did all these dots, right? So he did something very similar. Why not? And also in theater, you have, like, I was thinking a lot about these things because the one of the things which always comes up in terms of leadership, when people read my things, they go like, yeah, but you're always talking about individuals. Where are the people? Where is everybody else? And I go like, well, first of all, you have to have some sort of point of reference. You have to start somewhere. And so I always start with the individual. It sort of seems to make a lot of sense. And it's then also easier for people to start reflecting on themselves and their own behavior. The collective or the groups are also part of that. And in theater and cinema, you also have groups who create something. It's not just an individual, but still you would say there's still like a director, or there's still somebody who's the author of this play. So why not, have a master painter and a team or crew which, is part of that process? Why not?
Maybe we could see in the future books written with a team.
With a team, yeah. This is the interesting thing that literature seems to be still very much emerging from individuals and from teams, but I don't know. I'm not really an expert on that. Maybe, I mean, sometimes you have these collection of short stories which are, by different authors, and well, anyway, but who knows? Yeah.
Do you think drama has a place in life?
Absolutely. There's, life is highly dramatic. It's highly dramatic. If the extent to which emotions govern us or influences us is completely undervalued these days and underestimated. Everything political which is going on right now, and I don't necessarily want to go into the details, but if you go into the social political development these days, it seems to be all about feelings. I don't see much rational deliberation there. To be honest, I also don't see much values there anymore. I see mainly emotions, and which concerns me, but that's how it is. So there seems to be some thirst for a dramatic experience. Perhaps that's the positive side of it. So there's this thirst for dramatic experience, which is maybe not rendered elsewhere anymore. And this is being expressed collectively in some way. Maybe I'm just, wrong. Could be also that this is the case. But everything seems to be playing on our emotions, like media and politics especially, and this now on a global level, which is very strange, very weird. Like, we're living in very strange times, which is it's, I would say, not really well reflected on. Like, what is really happening here? Why are we experiencing this grand drama on a global scale? Why are so many people participating in this drama with all their emotions? And are they even aware of that? If we look back into history, which is the only reference point, and having read a lot of C.G. Jung, he warned of those kinds of collective emotional outbursts. Like, he said, if the drama doesn't unfold on a personal level, it will unfold on a collective level, and then it can become also very damaging. Which I agree that assessment. So, and again, the strange thing is that we don't have right now, we have some thinkers, but I would welcome more intellectuals and more big thinkers to step up to the stage and, write some good books about this and point to what is actually happening right now. We would need more of that right now, just to understand what is happening. Yeah.
Something occurred to me while you were talking. We take acting as a form of art, but as it happens in the language, acting is a relative concept. Acting as if, or acting like acting like something. It's based on something and through something somewhere. Acting as if emotions are important.
So, and your point is that you see it sort of like transcends the art form itself. Like, there's what I'm sort of getting from you. It's sort of, there's something implicit in it's interesting in English, especially when you talk about acting. It also has this connotation of to act, right? To do something. If you go out and buy some groceries, you're also acting, right? So, and then you have the art form of acting. This just sort of came to mind, or acting out something, an impulse, or fulfilling a role in life, or acting because you believe you have a certain character. And again, so all that is intertwined, right? There is. I was a long time not a fan of this of the saying that every person is an artist. I think didn't Shakespeare say something like every person is an actor and all the world's a stage? So I wasn't really I always felt that art has a specific place. But the longer you study that, you realize that there is no boundary. Just like I said, there is no boundary between the liminal and the actual or anything like this. So everything is artistic and creative and acting out something. And yeah, even like if you go back to C.G. Jung, this whole idea of a persona, of that our character is really something like we just use as for purpose to be able to act. It's the same thing as an actor trying to understand a character and using the character as a vehicle to act out a dramatic action within a play. It seems to be exactly the same thing.
Can we say just acting is impossible? Just doing something, of course it's possible, but there is always a motivation, and acting out something, acting like something, or it appears to me just doing something without context is impossible.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. It's it's difficult to like take some sort of absolute position, right? So probably the only absolute position would be, well, probably if you're absolutely enlightened, you don't have any need to act anything anymore. And up to now, I haven't met anybody, or I haven't ever experienced that state of mind that no action was needed. So I'll just be honest, like for me, a non-active mind is let's say it's something absolute. Yeah. So it's possible that something like this exists, but have I experienced that? No.
I was reading about music history from Ted Joya, and the deeper we go, the further we go back, everything unites. Art and poetry, music, action, cultural, societal instances. Everything unites under one or similar titles. But today we have everything separate. There is music and there is film. In film you can have music, but that's soundtrack, that's film music, that's something else. We have these categories. You are writing stuff, but it's fiction, so it's not true. It's science, it's because it's true science. It's funny ambiguities there are a little.
Yeah, probably because I'm biased towards this, and perhaps you as well. We see these splits, and we see them as a problem. So it could be that this is not a problem at all, but this is actually just a great benefit that these things are now separated so clearly in front of us, whereas probably they are not, I would say, on one hand. And the lack of meaning people experience is because they perceive these things as separate from each other. I would say so. They would say, well, because my life is non-dramatic, it doesn't really have meaning. I don't experience meaning in my life. It is somewhere else, right? It is probably somewhere either in a scientific discovery or a scientific process, or it is within those people who now do all this tech and develop all that software, or it is perhaps in an artist who develops a play and I go to and enjoy that play. So to feel that is probably always, so the disconnection, or to experience these disconnections, is to experience probably the disconnection from one's own meaning-making ability, I would say. Yeah, and that the whole point why I wrote those things or worked on this was to to find a way back somehow into this meaning experience. And maybe that is a bit naive, because Boyce quite rightly wrote something like, those who are in the cold, you cannot bring them back into the warm. And I was struggling against that for a long time, but I would agree by now. You can't bring them back. There is no way back.
Do you think story is distinct from narrative? I would say a story is something we construct. Take Lord of the Rings, for example. I read it, but when I talk about it, I don't read it, and I don't mention everything in it. I just take one aspect of it and bring it into importance and talk about it. Its story is this. Stories are always, there is a writing form called story, and there is another story. Its story is this: here's what happens. But in my mind, I don't have that story. Its meaning is somewhat distinct from both stories. It's a bit nonsensical.
This is, I just can intuitively, I would say that there's a constant narrative going on without the story necessarily being known. And to a part, the story is only becoming aware in hindsight somehow. Maybe that's the best distinction I can make, to say that, like our own stories become clear to us when we look back, but they are not clear while we are in them and writing them, in fact. So, and creating this narrative all the time. Because the story implies, again, some sort of beginning, middle of an end, some sort of climax, and all these sort of things and turning points. Which is interesting, because within the liminal space, and I had many sessions also with groups, first of all, the liminal space, when you are in a group with other people and experience it together, there's obviously a narrative. There's obviously, like, you can immediately sense the narrative within that space, that it is being written or made or constructed, or you're part of this construction of this narrative. It's very powerful. But not only that, there seems to, like, the element of story is more immediate. And I said, like, it's almost like condensed. Like, you have, if you would have like a 1 hour session in liminal space as a group, you always would have a story within that time. And when you talk about story, it is that, you would experience somewhere a turning point, which is in, let's say, real life time, right? And when you are in your home and you do your things, you get up and you have breakfast and all that, the story element seems to be a little bit watered down. The drama, let's put it this way, like, it's a little bit slower. You would experience the story at some point, but it seems to take up more time. Whereas in liminal space, it's more condensed. Like, in 1 hour, you would experience a story. And why would you experience that? Because you would have some sort of epiphany within that time. So, and you would always have an epiphany. And epiphany and turning point and some self-realization and all that is part of story, I would say. It's always an element of story.
You made a video on Kindermärchen, fairy tales. And I have some complicated relation to fairy tales, because I don't know if they are natural as I might thought.
As natural?
When I think of fairy tales, I want to think that they always were, and someone wrote them down, but they are archetypal. They are not stories, and they are good forms for me to emulate. But after I read Tolkien's own fairy stories, I've had second thoughts. In that essay, Tolkien says with much, he writes for many pages, and in the end says a fairy tale cannot be distinguished. You can't point out that's a fairy tale or not, because fairies are defined creatures, and he goes by eliminating the common forms and common books like Alice Adventures in Wonderland and dictionary definitions. He strikes them out one by one and reaches the conclusion you can't point out to fairies and fairy tales. It's a state of enchantment, and it's much like UFOs, but if you think UFOs are aliens, then it's science fiction, and its importance is its levels of interestingness is very much down.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned science fiction and Tolkien. So like some sort of, I wouldn't say it's not. I know it's not a world of fantasy, but like, I'm not saying he's fantasy, but I'm just reminded of the genre of fantasy also. But especially science fiction is. How should I phrase that? So what's the whole point of looking at fairy tales? Probably none. I mean, why should I look at fairy tales? So I would say their main quality, but this goes for any literature or any piece of art, would be their associative power, like being captivated by their content. But you could be captivated by any content, and this could be also science fiction. So it depends on the perspective which you're taking. So if you follow some reasoning, you would say, well, fairy tales have a condensed or higher level of meaning making quality or something like that, because they have survived centuries of time and still are able to captivate us and interest us. Okay, why not? But perhaps somebody else is captivated by other content, by other stories or other narratives or other pieces of art. So personally, what I see is like the power of the association is that, and that's then the question of, again, utility, to say, well, what is the utility of that? And then again, the question, why do we think about utility, comes in. But let me just put it very bluntly, like if you would work with somebody as a client in a process, and a certain fairy tale image does come up in the conversation, there must be a reason for this. Why is this person talking about this fairy tale right now, or is alluding to it? Like, this reminds me of Snow White, this situation, right? So, and this happens more often than not, that people reference either fairy tales or other pieces or stories and says, oh, this reminds me of Lord of the Rings in this moment, or this reminds me of H.G. Wells, this situation. So why are they doing that? I think that's then the most interesting part to explore. And then to, again, if you go down that rabbit hole, referencing Alice in Wonderland, to have an epiphany and say, oh, that's why I'm interested in this, or that's what's actually happening to me in this moment, is somehow buried beneath that. That's why I'm captivated, or that's why I'm making this allusion or this reference to that piece of art in that moment, because something else is trying to tell me something. That's it. And I've seen that happen several times, and it's a bit as if something is knocking on a door and is already announcing its entrance. But through this illusion of fairy tale or whatever it is, story or whatever's going on, it's like, yeah, it's making itself known that it's about to come. So it sounds ominous, but that's what happens, yeah.
You wrote in a blog post that you were fascinated by the phrases form and potential.
The phrases of, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Form and potential.
Form and potential. Yeah, this is probably also alluding to this question of symbolic thinking and this question of what are symbols. And I researched a lot this question. When you start off looking into like constituting elements of art, of course, symbol is brought to you as an idea, right? So I looked into this and try to figure out what a symbol is and why it is meaningful for us, and not just in the question of, well, I look at something, an image, and it's a symbol, and what does that symbol mean? That's part of it, and I'm sure that's very important, and there are people doing right now a lot of good work on that. But I was more driven by this, because I've experienced it myself, is why do we experience something in the future symbolically? Like, as I said, there's something knocking at the door and announcing itself through a symbolic representation, as we just said, referencing Alice in Wonderland or whatever that could be. So that's like as if the symbol is trying to push itself to the forefront through this announcement and saying, here's the potential future, let me in. And that's what I would say is a symbolic experience. And again, C.G. Jung has worked on this a little bit and is trying to explain that to us, that we seem to shape our future through first and foremost through some sort of symbolic expression, psychologically speaking.
Can you name the symbols? Or your main symbol, can you name it? I don't think you can.
I would say you can experience them, but naming them is, if you don't experiencing them, fairly difficult. So again, you can experience them in this liminal state of mind. That's where it's more prevalence in terms of experiencing this symbol. I wonder if there's one symbol, or if there's let's say like a concerto of symbols. I can't really answer that, but what I can say is that we do seem to experience many things first symbolically. And yes, you can knowingly and with agency, and you can experience these and say, okay, that's what it is. And it's fairly simple. It's some sort of image. It's not very mysterious or very occult or anything like that. It's very simple. In fact, it's just some sort of image.
Are there natural ways of making art or writing?
Natural ways.
Yeah. When I think about it, the most natural thing I can think of is note-taking.
That's a good question. I guess a lot has been written and worked on this thing of writing and, trying to make people more creative or help them in the writing process and alleviate any obstructions and things like that. And it's an interesting subject because I thought about that just recently. So, and I don't really know an answer to that. I have to, so like, I read a lot about these things, but I haven't thought deeply about that. The only thing I have thought deeply about and worked a lot is acting. And maybe it is a reference to come to an answer to what you're asking is, so the acting process, or if you work with people who want to act or be better at their craft, there seems to be one fundamental obstruction to whatever they're doing, and that is that they usually generate an idea of what they must do. So they generate an idea, and this becomes their main obstruction to acting what I would say naturally. And I, now having written a lot myself, would say this applies also to the writing process. So as soon as you generate an idea of what you think you must achieve or write, your writing is not natural anymore. And that's a very scary thought, I think, for any artist and for myself, to be very honest, because again, then you're more confronted with the unknown, which is you don't know what you're doing. You don't know where you're going, and you don't know if anybody is actually interested in what you're doing. I don't know if that works for everybody or for myself, because I'm also in a writing process right now. But from the observation of working with actors, that is where they are best in that space. This is what I know about writing. I can't tell you, but in terms of acting, that's where the actors are the most powerful. And they don't know what they're doing, where they're going, and if anybody's interested.
Do you think, I always start with do you think, but you don't have to thought about it, but let's think together.
Let's think together, agree.
That seems natural to me. Do you think theater has a reality function today? Because people see films and theater is not what it's used to be. Theater is something else. Theater is sublime art form today, not a natural art form. Or not a natural theater is not a content. Plays are not content. Would you agree?
I don't, yeah, yes and no. I mean, this, I'm thinking about the times when I go to the theater and that I come out of the experience always refreshed. So even if the theater play is not very relevant or not very good, I come out and feel better. I can't tell you why or what was on or something, but I always feel good after that. And so that's number one. That's just on a very personal, emotional level. So it makes me feel good. On a social level, I would say, but again, that's a very personal opinion, is that could art become more relevant? Yes. How can it become more relevant? I don't know. I just don't right now. I don't see the struggle. I don't see the fight for relevancy. I would like to see more. I don't know, more revolt. Just like that's just like. I think it's theater. Any art has more. There's more need for it nowadays, but for the need to be fulfilled, it would have to revolt. Actually, it would have to. I don't know. And this revolt would have to be fundamental in the sense that it refuses to be sidelined into art. Like it would just like, I don't know. And I don't, that's just what I feel like. It's just, it would have to refuse to say, I am not this where you just go one evening to look at me. That's not what I am. And refuse to be that. So I get, and so it's very radical, this thought, and I don't know what it means, but that's where it would have to start. And I don't see that right now. Maybe it exists. I mean, the art world is huge, and probably I'm doing a disservice to many. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite plays or playwrights?
this comes from a lot because the time when I was reading a lot of plays is really a long time ago, and that's probably where where my favorites still are, like Ibsen, Strindberg, Chekhov. So Tennessee Williams.
Let's ask like that. What soul content do you need in order to function? By that I mean art, but I didn't want to use the word art.
It's interesting. I think a conversation like this is very interesting for me and inspire. I just say it like it is. It's very inspiring, and to connect to other people on these topics, such as yourself right now, is something which helps me to keep going. And my own writing at the moment, which helps me to keep going. So it's just recently I said to somebody, I'm writing again, and he said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yeah, this is like an act of self-defense. Like it's just, I just need to, right? I don't need to see if other way forward." In German, there's the word Notwehr, which is, I think, better than self-defense. It's like an act of
emergency.
Act of emergency, yes. There's like, this is just an act of sheer emergency and not quite desperation, but it needs to be done to be able to survive, basically. That's it. Yeah.
So that's a new symbol for us. I think you have to do.
Yeah. I think you have to do, yes. Yeah. But it took some time to get back to that point, like to realize this is it, this is that which needs to be done, because also it requires a lot of courage, especially this fact of just not really knowing what you're doing. This is the worst part about it. So yes, having the agency, because it's still you who's sitting down every day and doing it. But actually right now I don't really know what I'm doing. Like the articles you're referring to, I had a sense that I knew what I was doing when I was writing the articles, but now it's different. Like I don't really know what I'm doing. So we'll see.
Could you talk about it if it's not personal? To think you don't know what you're doing, about to think you don't know what you're doing. What's it like to what are you optimizing for? It's a terrible way to ask, but
no, it's actually a good way to ask.
What do you like about it? There's the way I see this, there's always something, some focal points in titles, and the other stuff, although being good or decent or acceptable, always makes that original focal point real. They are there to serve a function, but in a natural way, so it doesn't make the eye uncomfortable.
Well, I guess what I'm doing now, I'm writing now on a longer story or novel or something like that, and it's not an article in the sense that like, okay, you're capturing some sort of idea which can live on for 2 or 3 pages, let's say, and so if it's a longer story, there needs to be, as far as I can see up to now, because I haven't really written a novel up to now, there seems to be something which, or it requires more groundwork or fertilization, more trust to be able to sustain that marathon. And I think that's the main difference right now. Yeah. Yeah. And so the time period where you don't know what is happening is much longer as when you write an article. There's a time period where you don't know what's going on, but it's over quicker. You can sort of like endure that. But to endure this over a time period of weeks, for example, that you don't know what you're doing, is tough. So, how do I know that it's still doing something? Is this aspect when I write down or sit down to write, that seems to be something happening. Something is still moving. It's not just treading water all the time. So there's some movement, there's some small epiphany. There's something, just the other day I wrote like 3 pages on somebody who's an alcoholic. And I thought, oh, interesting. There's a person who's an alcoholic in the story. I didn't know that before. I'd never planned that there would be a person who's an alcoholic in my story. So I was surprised. And as long as that keeps on going, where like within these smaller sessions that there's some surprise, I will keep going.
That's my challenge right now, to write longer works. That's not a page long, and that in it that people will find some real things.
Yeah, and that's where we're back to this. I sort of like lost my thread over there, where you said something in the natural way of writing. And I referred back to acting, but I didn't come back to the writing part. I don't know if there are books out there. Like there are some books about people trying to help people to write. Okay, but what I haven't encountered up to now is this aspect, how to say that, which is really not easy. Let's say, okay, so people, for example, people write about character development, but the problem with like when they write about character development, it becomes very abstract. And even using the term character is already putting an idea forward which obstructs your natural flow of writing. You say, oh, I have to develop a character. So, and then it's already dead, right? There's no way you can write anything when you think I have to develop a character. So I was just thinking about that recently, because I've been writing, and then after a couple of weeks, I was, what am I doing? Oh, I'm developing characters. This is weird. I didn't even realize I was doing that. So there seems to be something which is called character development, just like there is something like character development in acting, right? And it's the same problem as in acting, that if you say tell the actor, please develop a character, it's finished. There is no character anymore. So, having said that, and because I think you mentioned that you are onto this topic on writing in general and how to write about writing, would be to find a language which inspires people to do that, right? In some way. Just like in acting, there needs to be a language and a process which inspires the actors to develop their characters, without telling them, now you develop a character. And this exists, by the way. It's interesting that I know that in acting there is a way, like you can do that, you can inspire them in some way. So there must be a way also in writing for that to happen, which I haven't seen up to now. I don't know, I haven't seen any books on that. All the books are very literal. They always tell you what to do. But by doing that, they already fail in doing what they want to do.
Someone like Tolkien will find names, invent names, then do something with them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of entry points for that. You know, I mean, you can also just start with a landscape, and you know, the character develops from the landscape, or anything. I guess what sort of there seems to be something very strange going on, which I can't really pinpoint is again this mixing of the unknown and the known. Like certainly there's things you know about your characters from your own life experience, but you can't replicate that from your life experience. That it doesn't become a character. So there's something weirdly as if you're sort of like intertwining these two things all the time, and then you're creating these characters. That's what I would describe it, but I could be wrong, because yes, he's right. You can start from any point, and perhaps what's helpful for me is not helpful for somebody else. I have no clue. Yeah.
Can we say that each person has a massive data collection in their minds as memories, but whether that's useful or not, or whether that's available or not, it depends on the title they're working on.
Yeah, I think that's it's probably like a field of experimentation, right? Like, yeah. So memories can't be denied, and their influence on whatever you're writing also cannot be denied. I believe that is the case, but overemphasizing them most likely isn't helpful, and denying them is also not helpful. So probably there's some sort of middle ground, and which is interesting. And again, I think there's a way also for people to lift this potential up by, for example, maybe that's now a bit too abstract, but I worked with groups on something called look at your memories like a dream. Okay, so you pick up a certain memory from your childhood and you describe it, and then you look at it as if it's a dream. It's not real. It didn't really happen. You were just dreaming this event. And what is interesting, that when they start looking at it as a dream, that somehow something happens where they completely understand this memory in a different way. Completely different. And the mind, and this happens with everybody who goes through this, really struggles then. You can see how they struggle internally to say, no, but this really happened. And then you go, no, let's just suspend that for 10 minutes and say it's a dream. What if it were a dream? What does this dream mean? And I guess that's the same struggle when you draw, or when memories start to influence your work as an artist. You have to suspend the belief that these memories are real, that this really happened. And that is strange. But then I think they can become a source of inspiration once you don't cling on them as if they were a real part of your past. And that is an interesting struggle. That is a very interesting struggle. So, that could be part of a book on writing, for example. So, because that is again, coming back to this idea that there's a fundamental paradoxical force which supports you in your creative process. That would be part of that paradox. What you have experienced is real and not real at the same time.
Could we say the ideal book on writing is not a book on writing?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. There's I think everything which is prescriptive. Many years ago, I learned these terms from my social studies: prescriptive and descriptive. So everything which is a prescription for something, there seems to be always failures or like built into that immediately. Like these are the 10 steps you need to do something, right? There's many books on that, and they're very popular and sell very well. But and perhaps there's also some utility in them for some people. But I don't know. I don't know. So yes, the book about writing is not about writing. Absolutely. It's just like, this is not a rose, or this is not a pipe, or that this representation of something is not that. So that book on writing, which is really a good book, is not about writing. Yeah. Yeah.
What are your some favorite books in German?
I don't in German. Oh wow. Before we come to, I'm just going to say that the Pfaueninsel, which is the island, the Peacock Island, is the last German book, which is really my favorite. I even keep it still. A lot of books I don't keep. But coming back to this book about writing, there's something else. There is this book about drawing. And what is fascinating, the art, what is it called? Nikolaides, I think, made this book about drawing, The Art to Draw. And it is not a book about drawing. It's very strange, but because what he tries to convey is when you look at an object and you start, there's this exercise where you start to draw the outline of this object on a piece of paper. And what he says is, don't draw what it looks like, but try to feel it as you draw it. So he's trying to encourage you to focus not on the drawing sensation, but to experience the texture or the feeling of this object while you're drawing it. So it goes along that line, I would say. So that's number one.
Do you know the rubber hand illusion?
The what?
Rubber hand illusion.
Ah, yeah, where there's like three hands and one of them is made of rubber.
People can condition to feel some external object as if it's in their own minds, as if they belong to them.
Interesting. See, so he seems to be, probably he wasn't aware of that, but he seems to, right, the rubber hand illusion. Yeah. So it becomes part of them and they can feel it actually.
They can feel something like it, or it's a scary thought, but it's real.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense when he emphasizes this aspect of feeling the object rather than seeing it and feeling it and then drawing it. And
do you draw?
I paint a little bit. I don't. Yeah, I paint. I don't sketch that, but I paint a little bit. And it's a different process, I would say.
Do you think perceptual awareness is different between painting and writing? If that makes sense. Because the way I reached that thought is someone like Velázquez or Caravaggio might have seen something when people acting in the groups. Like when three people form a group, and it's very hard to say, pronounce and say it for me. But when three people stay in a certain way, certain state, maybe that's an input for an artist like Caravaggio. But it's not an input for me.
I can only speculate because I'm not. I just looked into the matter of drawing and painting in a very superficial matter to find some common ground with other art forms in terms of what is this creative process? I have to assume, and there's a lot of assumption there, that there probably is some sort of higher idea which requires its expression and finds its expression through that inspiration, or connects with something which elicits that inspiration. Let's say these three people you're talking about, that something is being perceived in that moment and said, oh, that group is expressing what I feel inside of me, which is knocking on the door, right? So that's probably what is happening. So when I paint something, I see I might see an object and it seems to elicit that need to be expressed. That's the best I can come up with in that moment. With writing, it's a bit different, right? There is nothing. There is something there. There's still this need to be expressed, and of course, the images arise in that moment. But there's less that object which you're looking at, or which you perhaps as a painter would like to put on your canvas. I really don't know. I'm just winging it right now. But there seems to be a difference, as with every art form, and there seems to be some commonalities. So. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. You're probably right.
And I mean, you hear also stories of writers who, and sometimes also in these, how to become a writer books, who say, well, I read this article in a newspaper and that inspired me to then write this short story or something like that. So there is certainly that. So there is certainly this aspect of being inspired by something which is outside of yourself and which you look at and all that also in writing. And certainly when I write an article, it's very often connected to something I just read elsewhere or saw elsewhere. I mean, you referenced Tolkien, and Tolkien, I'm sure, was also inspired by this whole collection of myths and fairy tales which he had read beforehand.
Do you think there are good parts and bad parts in pieces of art and writing?
Well, certainly there are. I mean, I just read a longer, crime novel, and just for entertainment purposes while I was, flying here and there and spending time on airports. And what I noticed that, this is absolutely possible. That on one hand, okay, the overall plot of this crime novel might be very entertaining and also innovative and novel and surprising, and other parts are just, let's say, badly written and not very novel, like certain relationships which are described, or certain parts of the narrative which are redundant and all that. So yeah, it's going to happen easily. So I think that's the difference between a masterpiece and anything else. The masterpiece, I was just in a museum looking at Monet, and it's just unbelievable. The point is, even though the images are simple, right? They could be just haystacks or something like that, standing out in fields. Very simple, and you can sense it's a masterpiece. And what seems to be part of the masterpiece is that the details, the particulars, the brush, even the individual brush strokes themselves are filled with some meaning, are filled with some emotion. Everything, every detail is full of something. There is no part which is apart from the whole. So, okay, you could look at a little bit of a detail of a painting and you could see the brush strokes, but even those are not just brush strokes. And it's really strange. Like, you wouldn't say, oh, I can see that's where he painted this corner and he did it in a specific way. And the way he did it is actually, that's not so good. This way, he just filled in some color over here to cover up something. No, it's not like that. Like, everything is filled with life. And that's overwhelming. Like, when you experience like that, it's very overwhelming because you're not able to just take that part out and say, okay, the picture is fine, but this part of the sky is not that great. So that's probably why it's a masterpiece, whereas perhaps other pieces of art, and I'm reminded again of this crime novel, where there's good parts and entertaining parts, and then parts of it would go, yeah, really? I've read this part like 100 times before in other novels. So it's just, he was just repeating something, some memory, and he was just taking it from, basically out of his workshop and nailing it into the novel just to patch it up at that place. But he's not even making an attempt to create that part. So,
have you heard about fake memories?
So memories which are constructed, which didn't really happen.
Yeah. There's a social scientist named Diana Pasulka, and I've read in her book. I've not studied it carefully, but she says there are films and cartoons in 50s and 60s, and some people thought that they were real. And she says it very carefully and very well. So that's a topic to look for me. And it basically says that our memories and reality are somewhat shaped by media we consume.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's several parts to that. I mean, there's also this research being done on witness testimony, especially in in court proceedings and all that, where it has been shown that some witnesses are sure that they experience some things in their testimony which turns out to be untrue, and they don't know it, or they have, this has been suggested by them, by the investigators, like are you sure this happened this way? Didn't it happen this way? And they say, oh yeah, right, it happened this way. And from that moment on, they're 100% sure that this really happened in this way, that, whatever. And so, yeah, these cases are proven that people have certain memories, are suggestible, and then change also their memory in a certain way. That's back to the point which I was saying that, and this becomes then interesting when you actually work with people on their memories, suggesting to them that the memories are dreams and what that could mean for them as individuals. Because this experience usually is also very liberating. There is this aspect of us being like hostages of our memories, like prisoners somehow, especially because of the general diffusion of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis within our society, that we now are, we always were, but even now more so, I would say, hitched to our own memories and believe that our memories are somehow, and especially our childhood experiences are the driving factor for our characters and our life experiences, right? So their childhood trauma is everything, and basically you're just from that moment onward perpetuating your own trauma. But if you start looking at your memories as dreams, it's very liberating. You start to realize, no, I'm not just a product of my memories. That's not who I am. So it's this. There's also this aspect of unhitching yourself from that, which is great. But there's also another thing. What did she say? She said, popular culture. Yes. And in liminal space, especially, you can observe that popular culture, or culture in general, influences that space and co-creates it all the time. So, and it would be a mistake to fight that instead of just letting it do its thing. And also in your own artistic work, because sometimes you can feel that something is coming in which is not yours, but you've seen it somewhere in media, for example, and it starts to infiltrate your own creative process. And it's very annoying, right? It's a foreign object which is coming in. But the more you fight it, the worse it becomes. So you just allow it to happen and trust that this is actually a force for good, that whatever is coming in from media or whatever and influencing that space, maybe it's just trying to tell you something.
Maybe it's like Borges' story. He has a story about Don Quixote, and Pierre Menard, the author of Don Quixote, is the name of the story. And there is a Don Quixote by Cervantes, and there's an exact copy of Don Quixote, which a person named Pierre Menard wrote. And this reminded me of that. Even if we don't want to read Sherlock Holmes stories, if we are going to write something, or we are going to mention something, we have to know its existence because other people know it already. Will that be true?
And perhaps just admit to it in some way. Or perhaps we need to, at that moment in our creative endeavor, it's just that's the best we can come up with on our own artistic process. A little bit like that crime novel I was talking about. Perhaps he's very good in writing a good narrative, but he's not so good in writing relationships. So he takes them from other novels because he can't be bothered with that. So he just writes whatever. Relationship to mother is the same as Woody Allen or something like that. It's always this nagging Jewish mother. So, which is not great, because it's not great to read that and feel it, but it's the best you can do in that moment. So when I would say, yes, if you experience that as an artist, I would just be unashamed. Michael Caine, as an actor, once said, and also there's some truth in that, he said, when I see something good, I just steal it. Right? And I think it's that kind of honesty which can help you. If you're honest, like, to yourself about it and say, no, I'm just going to do what Tolkien did or Woody Allen or whatever, because right now I don't have an idea of my own. Okay, I'm just going to steal that. I would say just own it, and perhaps that can be helpful for the future. At least you're not blocked in some way, or you don't feel guilty and ashamed or inadequate in some way. So, yeah.
Let's finish it here. I thank you very much for your time and your views.
Well, thank you. That was so kind of you to suggest this conversation, and yeah, it was. It's fun and interesting. What can I say? I wish you best of success for your plans, and let me know how things are going, especially in the writing front, and whatever else you have in mind.
Maybe if I come to a decent checkpoints, I'll send some of my stuff to you.
That'd be fantastic. I'd love to read that. I'm really curious to see where you're going. Is that right now? That's your main direction is now the writing part. That's what I understood in the beginning.
Yeah, for a while. It's been
okay. Great.
And
yeah, fantastic.
The writing guides is something I want to write because, like you, I think most of them are not meant for writing.
See there we go. And that's interesting. Yeah, especially on that, and on everything, but especially in that. Yeah, keep me posted. Be very happy to look at that, and I'm very curious to see what you come up with. There's a certain need for something. I can't tell you what, but there's obviously, yeah. I'm still looking towards my board because there many years ago. I don't know if you ever read this book because it has some became rather well known. I think her name is like Jane Cameron. The Art of the Way of the Artist.
I heard about
it. Yeah. And this is also one of those books. I read it, I think, 30 years ago. And now when I reread it, I go like, no. But back then I read it and I was very much enthusiastic about it because I think there's what she did very well. Have a look at it. It's worth looking at because first of all, it's very practical, which I think is good for artists always to encourage to practice their art. So, and it's very positive and it's optimistic, and I think this is all very good. And again, that's good and not so good is some of those how to do things and all these kinds of exercises and all that. But I think what one can learn from it, or at least see why this tends to be a problem. It's the same in acting, by the way. Like the exercise is not the art process itself. Full stop. And sometimes people confuse the one with the other. Right, so it's like Zen, right? So that the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon, and the exercise is only the finger.
It's not the natural finger. I will add, it's not the natural behavior of finger.
Oh, very good.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, one of my characters also is a lecturer for literature in university, and he writes about writing, and he tries to teach other people how to write. It's not weird, strange.
Do you know Werner Herzog's film school?
No, does he have a film school?
He had a series of seminars, which he called Rogue Academy, if I'm not mistaken, and he basically talked about how to forge documents, how to pick pockets, how to pick locks, and things like that. He mainly suggested to read and do it anyway. It's like a anti-film school.
Yeah, that sounds like him. I mean, he's pretty well known for the fact that he, produced several films where he made claims that these were documentaries and they were completely invented. I was actually in film school in Berlin when he was showing one of his documentaries. I don't know where it was, which one it was called, but it was a documentary.
Lessons of Darkness?
No, I think that must have been before. It was a movie about, I don't know if it was in Russia or Belarus, and there was a scene because it was about Orthodox Church and belief. Do you know the movie?
Yeah.
What is it called?
Saints and Mystics of Russia. Or
something like that. Yeah, exactly. And I remember this to this day, that there's the scene where there's a he says there's a whole village submerged under a lake, because I think they built it's an artificial lake or something like that. And there's also a church which has been submerged, and in wintertime pilgrims would crawl over the ice in this motion, cleaning the snow from the frozen water, and then looking into the frozen lake, trying to see and hear because they believe there's a tradition which says when you listen carefully, you will hear the bells ring from that church. And he had this image of these people on the ice, looking through the ice in this Russian garb in the middle of the winter. And we were looking at it. He was screening it at films, and I remember I was deeply impressed, like, wow, this is incredible. Like, what is going on? I've never heard about this thing that, there are these pilgrims. And afterwards he came up and said, oh, this was completely invented. This never happened. And like people were really upset. Like people said, well, how can, what? Like they were like, even the film students, they were like very upset and said, how can you do this? And then claim this is like, and well, I don't know what he said exactly at the time. He says for him, there's no difference. It doesn't matter if you just invent it or if it's real. There's no difference really. He said the feeling which it elicits, that's the main thing. It's not what you see on the screen, which is important.
It's like a father who wants to teach a good lesson.
Yeah, I think that's why people were so upset at him. They're very anti-authoritarian. They don't want to be taught anything. But at least I took away that I said, there was this sense of awe and wonder when you looked at that, and that was worth it. I don't care I also didn't care if it was invented or not, because I remember I still like those images. I enjoy them. I enjoy the sense of which they instilled in me, and it was inspiring.
He did a similar thing years later in Antarctica, and made scientists to put their ears into the ice, and there was a issue there. The ears were stuck with ice.
Oh yeah. That's a dangerous thing. Yeah, a friend of mine who I went to film school with, he became so inspired. He also made a documentary about a long distance runner who traversed the former boundary or boundaries between East and West Germany. So when the wall came down, he shot this whole movie, which was completely invented, and he claimed it to be a documentary. And people believed that. It was so believable that this long distance runner really existed and was doing this big project running across Germany, commemorating the fall of the wall and all that. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Where can we find your films, old films?
I don't know if any of them are online anymore, because it's so long ago. Like when I went to film school, that's now over 30 years ago. So I don't know if any of those films still are in existence anywhere. I don't think so. I don't think anything can be found online. And I don't know if the type of films I made are that interesting. Probably I could have continued. I mean, it was just very tough to continue filmmaking. Financially, it was too tough, so I didn't continue. I would say probably the art, when I saw other artists doing something similar, probably I could have continued if I would have stuck with this stuff I did, and it would have been looked like Wes Anderson. Like the style of, so these artificial worlds, which are very much formalized and not real, that type of film, if I would have stuck with it, but I didn't. It was just too tough, just finding money and developing the stories and being responsible for everything and all that. It was just too hard, so I didn't continue. It's okay. Instead, I experienced other stuff, so.
In your YouTube page, there are short film-like sequences, which I quite like.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we'll see. But I don't think, what I like to do is, conversations like this, I enjoy. I think this is great. It's also great to see like-minded people like yourself. And this is what I really enjoy right now. And I can do some writing, but the filmmaking is just too. We'll see. It's too much. It's just always too much work. It's always projects. Several people are involved. So much can go wrong. It's just too much. So it's better to. It's just like you said. When you write, you have more agency over things. So that's how it feels like. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, I hope to hear from you, and it was great meeting you. What can I say? Fingers, knock on wood, whatever.
Yeah, I've learned so much from you. Not directly, but through symbolism. Through knocks at the door.
And if we can collaborate on something, if you ever have an idea, just let me know. I'd be happy to do that. Well, bring it on. Bring it on. No, really, I'm happy. If you have an idea where we can collaborate, be happy to hear that. And maybe it's good if it comes from you, because my observation in the last couple of years have been like, I always offer for people to collaborate on something and they go like, no. And then I go like, okay. So maybe it's good if it comes from your side, if you have, but I'm always happy about people coming up with ideas or saying, should we do this or can we do this? Or would you like to contribute on that? So I'd be happy to do that.
Great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
okay.
Currently, I'm trying to compose. But it's just trying something in the composing field about what to mostly about learning. But my feeling is more than practicing pieces than composing is more important. But it's whole another story, which I will not pursue anyway.
Mm-hmm. But do you see the themes there seem to be something about learning and understanding and creating and all this. So there seems to be like this field where you're into, and probably where also our like experiences sort of overlap. That's how I see it. So anyway, yeah. So we'll see if there's something, or if you have an idea, just let me know. I'd be happy. And it's always good, it's sometimes good to work by yourself, and sometimes it's also inspiring just to get into contact with other people.
I've also written a theater play, which is still in my Google Drive.
Okay.
Which I don't know what to do with.
Yeah, this is, well, you can... it depends on your personal energy, if you still have the energy to direct something, or to
maybe a little home theater.
Yeah, or with
maybe I can act out the whole parts.
You can act them out. You can maybe find some people. Who knows? Like, it's weird how inspiration works at times. This whole liminal farm business, like for 2 years, I met once a week with a group of artists just to explore liminal space with them. And I thought, I never thought that this would work, but it did. They always showed up. We always continued working. And with plays, with anything like a project like that, it's the same thing. Like when you feel that there's some energy somewhere, or you have an idea, you should just try it. And then maybe just from that small seed, something can grow. And you find those people say like, we really want to do this play. So who knows? Or as you said, you feel that, I could play all these parts myself. Sometimes I go like, maybe I should do something, a little bit of acting again. Or when you talk about films, I go like, there seems to be something. But we'll see. Where the inspiration is, it'll take us.
Or visit us at night through the door.
That's it. Knocking at the door.